The Adventure of Isaac Saddlesore and the Witches of Drenn, or The Dancing Ladies. Part 3. The Cleric in Coach B.
Isaac Saddlesore, the easily distracted detective, had been visited by the humorously tiny Carol Turntrout. He had told us of the curious death of Fergus Grapefund and the even stranger legend connected with the family-owned estate, Embuggerance Hall. We had met the new owner, Sir Maxwell Grapefund, who had just arrived in England from Australia. He had showed us a vast collection of cryptic notes that he had received constantly ever since he had set foot on our shores. He had also woken in his hotel room to find his face and pillow covered in plaster dust. The source of this plaster dust was a total mystery. Then, to cap it all, we thought we had found the writer of the notes and gave chase. Unfortunately, the swine gave us the slip, and I was violently ill. I have a constitution that is utterly opposed to running. So far, the case had only become more confusing to my own mind. What Saddlesore made of it I didn't know, for he had left that evening to slip into a different world at an opium den. I had taken the free time as an opportunity to visit my favoured pleasure parlour on Bomley Road. Woof. That following morning, I was to meet Saddlesore and Sir Maxwell in our reserved compartment on the train for Drenn in Suffolk, where we were to accompany our Australian friend to Embuggerance Hall. I arrived at 11:15. To be sure, I did not miss the departure at 11:35. I whistled for a porter once on the platform, but the only hint of service I got was an arrogant youth with a glamorously gigantic boil on his nose, flicking me a gesture not to be described. So, dragging my incredibly light luggage to the door of Coach B, I looked about me for signs of Saddlesore and Sir Maxwell.
Morning, Doctor!
Sir Maxwell, you startled me. I damn near soiled myself.
Sorry about that, Pop Buns. Only a laugh. Are you getting on or what?
Have you seen Saddlesore?
No, not a dingle hopper's ditch Whitworth on him. But there is some bloody reverend in here. I've told him this compartment is reserved, but the stubborn bastard, the Bible basher, won't move.
The 11:35 train, Suffolk is ready to depart. All orders coming aboard.
Where is the dratted man? The fool is probably still in some stupor in Soho. What an unutterable ass.
Blow!
Get on, hot bums. The man can catch the next one. If he can't be bothered to turn up on time, it's no shell off my shrimps. I can't stand the prattling poof down at any rate.
Dash it all! Take up my luggage with you, Sir Maxwell. Yes, I know, but let's just...
Come on, son.
Just grab it by the hand.
No.
Let me push, man.
Is that your own shirt?
Yes, it's all my own stuff.
Get your foot up.
Okay,
Get one foot at a time.
Put it in this helpy! No, this is getting... Oh, my lord, I've never known a man weigh so much. Wear such a consume. Bloody hell.
My ankle! I clambered into the compartment and threw myself down onto the bench opposite Sir Maxwell as the train pulled away. Next to my companion, snuggled up to the window onto the conductor's walkway, was a little man all in black. His wide-brimmed hat was pulled low over his squinting eyes, his lower lip hung and quivered wetly, and his cheeks blushed in a jolly sort of way. He nodded to me in a courteous greeting and went back to peering out of the window. His long grey hair bristled over the scarf he had draped over his shoulders, and his nervous fingers fumbled with the crucifix about his neck. Good morning, Saddlesore.
Oh, how did you know it was me, George?
There are very few clergymen, I imagine, that go about stinking quite so strongly of poppy smoke, Isaac.
Curse my numbed nose. But well done, Hodbuns, you're using my methods. It appears I'm finally rubbing off on you.
No, what a thoroughly revolting image.
Bash me with a boomerang. Saddlesore, you surely are a wily son of a cove. By Struth, I'd never have guessed. I'd have got out at Drenn and been none the wiser. Frankly, I wish I was still ignorant.
What is this charade in aid of Isaac? I nearly missed the train waiting for you.
I'm afraid that last night's entertainments ended on a sour note. After partaking of the pipe, I realized I had neglected to furnish myself with any funds. The proprietor was, to say the very least, irate on hearing the news that I could not pay. I ran home and hurriedly donned this disguise so I could make my way to the station without fearing for my life. Have you ever met an opium dealer, Hodbuns?
I am delighted to say that I have not.
Well, you do not want to get on the wrong side of one. Being Orientals for the most part, they know ways to inflict deathly pain that you could not begin to imagine. Ingenious and brutal. Trouble is, they make such damn fine tea.
Saddlesore, could I ask that if you are to be my protector until this whole peculiar situation has been satisfactorily concluded, you keep yourself out of any further scrapes? It's a strain for me to trust a man I find so irritating in the first place. If you are going to be a liability, you can shove on out of it altogether.
You wish to end up like your cousin Fergus? Liver exploding in suspicious circumstances?
Don't threaten me, Mr. Saddlesore.
I'm not threatening you. I'm saying that without me, you will never get to the bottom of all this. And you could very well end up in hot water.
What monstrous egotism!
Imagine living with it for weeks on end.
If you don't like it, George, you can always go back to your fiancée. Oh, no, sorry. She's calling off the engagement.
Don't exaggerate, Saddlesore. We're going through a rocky patch, I admit, but Alice wouldn't call off the engagement.
Oh, no? I took the liberty of opening your mail whilst at 32DD, changing into this mutter. Here, read it for yourself.
I slipped the letter from the torn envelope, choosing to brush over the fact that Saddlesore had flagrantly disregarded any kind of privacy I was owed by opening private letters addressed to me in my absence. I read the note from my dear, beautiful Alice. Well, we'll go to the foot of my stairs.
I'm sorry, old man. That must be a kick in the thundersack. Never thought of marriage myself. The women down under are all built like brick outhouses. Was this Alice a large girl?
No, not really. I never thought you'd actually go through with something like this.
Really? You thought you could continue to play away and she'd be waiting for you to come home like a dog sat waiting at the window for its master? Of course she wouldn't. Alice has much more gumption and guts than that. I rather liked her, in fact. It's a shame it won't last.
Oh well. Onwards and upwards and all that, I suppose.
That's the spirit. Plenty more sharks in the sea.
But if I ever find out who told her about my little trip to the kitten house, why, I'll bounce the hypocrite's trouser chestnuts all about the town of London.
The likelihood that you ever discover the culprit is laughably weak. I wouldn't waste your energy. May I ask, are you fully prepared for our stay at Embuggerance Hall?
Of course.
Did you pack your luggage yourself?
No, I asked Mrs. Flumsom to do it.
That is probably best. While she may be the most fearsomely unpleasant-looking heifer to stray from the butcher's market, she has organisational skills that would stun an obsessive-compulsive.
Sounds like my mother.
Foulsome Herodin, is she?
Don't you ever talk about my mother, Saddlesore.
And are you armed, Hudbuns?
But of course. I drew open my greatcoat, revealing my impressive collection of ironmongery. Pokers, crowbars, marling spikes, boat hooks, blades of varying lengths and strength, shanks, sabres, machetes, grappling irons, saws, clinker, and shrapnel.
Is that all?
Oh, plus my conch.
Timey, kangaroo down, sport. Are you expecting a bloody army uprising? You've more tools than a plumber's bag.
One can never be too careful, Sir Maxwell.
If I had all that hardware under my coat, I'd be walking around pretty carefully too. Don't for the love of sanity sneeze or you'll lose your essentials.
Well, fret not. I keep my keys and money in my hat.
That wasn't what I meant.
Oh.
How does a doctor come across such an array of heavy-duty weaponry? I'd have expected you to have surgeon's blades or something.
Great Buddha's boobs! I am not a medical doctor. Why does everyone make that assumption?
It's an understandable mistake, George. I don't know why you insist on using the prefix if a daily misunderstanding sends you into apoplexy. Your doctorate is mind-bendingly obscure and unclean.
I'm intrigued. What is your doctorate for then, Dr. Hotbuns?
15 years ago or so, it happened that my smutty fiction sold very well among the soldiers over in Afghanistan. So well indeed that demand increased, almost beyond my humble capabilities. But I struggled bravely on and penned much of my best and most depraved work during that period. It was declared that without my heroic contributions, the war would have gone far worse for us. The moral support of my novels was considered invaluable, and so, eventually, I was awarded an honorary doctorate for services to smut and my country. Oddly, I was not to be presented this tribute from any university, as is normal.
Because no reputable university wanted anything to do with a peddler of perverted prose.
But instead, I was to receive it from Queen Victoria herself.
Who hadn't any scruples worth a pinch of
The
coke.
Queen was awfully nice, too. She invited me up to her bedroom after the ceremony, but I ceremoniously declined. She was, at that time, nearly 300 years old, and so demented that she thought anyone with a moustache was her dead husband, Prince Albert, back from the dead to snuffle between her fat ankles once again. Oh, God rest her imperial soul.
Good riddance to bad royals!
Well, can a koala and call it Constance? That story is so absurd it's almost beyond belief. But I'll take your word for it, gentlemen. Did you meet Her Majesty as well, Saddlesore?
Oh, I didn't know hot buns back then. We met about 8 years afterwards, I believe.
Yes, the less said of those circumstances, the better.
Agreed.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, Sir Maxwell doesn't want to hear about the contents of your tin bucket.
Even less what you did with your collection of eels.
You're right. I really don't want to know. Why not ditch that scrapyard you're carrying in your coat and use a revolver, Dr. Hotbuns?
Oh, I abhor the use of firearms.
But not firearms.
Bullets are for cowards. If you can't see the whites of your enemy's eyes in combat, then you are no gentleman.
I shouldn't be too heavy-handed with your cries of gentleman, George. Coming from a man who's barely had time to do up his fly button since leaving a horse buried, it takes on a slightly bitter flavour.
Shut up, Saddlesore! Instead of constantly jibing at me, why not explain your infuriatingly vague points you left me with last night?
What were they, hot buns? Forgive me, but my memory is a little addled at the moment.
You said that I was to consider 2 points with regards to the plaster dust Sir Maxwell found on his pillow.
And my bloody face.
Indeed. The first, you said, something about the porter having soap on his key. And the second, if the original cannot be found, how does one acquire an exact replica? I mean, where am I to even start with such clues? They're more baffling than the original occurrence.
Not at all, hot buns. Quite elementary. I'm surprised you haven't made any progress from such obvious leads.
I'm with the doctor on this one. What the blue-buttock blazes does any of that have to do with me waking up half-choked to death with plaster dust?
I apologise, gentlemen. I shall endeavour to slow my brain down to your snail pace and walk you through it.
You sure you want to do that? Oh, I mean, I could just punch you in the mouth now and save us all that platypussy footing around.
The porter we found you engaging in heated discussion with yesterday, do you remember him?
Yes, the little weedy squirt, gibbered like a hung wombat.
Well, he had, as most porters do these days, his pass key to all hotel rooms hung around his neck on a large ring. I don't suppose either of you noticed, but the key itself was flecked with peelings from a bar of soft soap.
Of course I didn't notice that. Why would I?
Why, indeed. That is why I'm a private detective, and you are... What is it exactly that you do?
I'm a businessman.
What line of business?
I'm in the business of keeping my nose out of other people's business. I advise you do the same.
Very well. My first question was, of course, why on earth did the porter have soap flakes on his key?
He had just cleaned it.
Are you in the habit of cleaning your keys, Hotbums? Do you take them into the bath with you?
No. I suppose it is a little far-fetched.
It's in the next continent! No! The only serious conclusion to be drawn is that someone wished to make a copy of the key, and so took an impression of the key in the soap.
Good Lord.
Waltz my Matilda.
But how would someone have obtained the key from the porter without him knowing?
I took the liberty of asking the poor bedraggled wretch before we departed the hotel yesterday.
When?
Well, Sir Maxwell, Turntrout, and yourself indulged in your afternoon tea. It is astounding what I can get away with whilst you're focused on ingesting, Hotbums. I once entirely redressed you in a suit of pink tweeds without you taking the blindest bit of notice. Your luncheon taking all of your attention at the time.
Well, I'm dashed.
And what did the puny piss streak tell you, Saddlesore?
On the evening of your arrival, Sir Maxwell, he encountered a peculiar fellow in the lobby. Whilst the gentleman clearly wasn't a guest at the hotel, our porter hadn't given the meeting a second thought until I asked him if anything strange had occurred within the past 2 days. The gentleman was willowy of frame and had a high, feminine voice.
That's rich, coming from that warbling woodchuck.
I paraphrase the youth's actual words. He expressed himself in the most unappealing manner. The gentleman engaged him in a rambling and nonsensical conversation until finally he made to leave and tripped. To stop his fall, he had gripped the key around the boy's neck. He then hurriedly departed the hotel. Now, of course, it is clear to anyone that the fall was an excuse to squeeze the key into the bar of soap, which I imagine was warming in the pit of his fist while he babbled at the poor boy.
Shove a jumbuck in me tucker bag. And why would they want to make a pass key for the rooms at the Dorchester? Burglary?
Nothing has been reported stolen. The only abnormality to take place was your own incident with the plaster dust.
So, this disturbed pervert wanted to break into my room just to dump a load of plaster dust on my face?
Ah, well. I think I shall hold off on my thoughts on the actual plaster for a little while. At least until we get to Drenn.
Why? For heaven's sake, you infuriating wisp of a man!
I would like to prove my theory before expounding it to such harsh critics.
You saying I'm unreasonable, you toffee-tasting tug-job?
Not at all.
For the remainder of the journey, Maxwell and Saddlesore sat in relative silence, trying to forget the other were there. I entertained myself by cracking out the exquisite picnic that Mrs. Flumpsome had packed for me. Whilst I masticated my 40th offal pie, I pondered over the new information Saddlesore had given us. I must admit that at the description of the soap-pressing fellow, my thoughts had instantly turned to our Carol Turntrout, he of fragile build and high whining voice. But if he were the culprit, what possible motive could he have for engaging Saddlesore on the case? Unless he wished himself to be caught. He certainly struck one as distinctly odd, not just because of his bantam-like body, but his way of moving about silently and seemingly disappearing from sight. I decided to keep my thoughts on the subject to myself for the present until any further evidence presented itself. Or, at least, until my mouth was no longer full of delicate tripe pastries. We arrived at the station just outside of Drenn and took a trap that had been organised to bear us to Embuggerance Hall. The driver sat high at the front of the vehicle, hunched over the reins in his filthy cigarette. The air was thick with the threat of rain, so the ochre clouds he exhaled hung like a persistent plague over our heads in the back of the glorified cart.
I say, my man, better be an absolute rogue and try your shag.
Here, baby.
Muttering thus, the hunched figure delved into the depths of his crotch and pulled out a pouch of damp tobacco leaf. Presently, the slate-grey skies gave up the fight and the rain began to fall, lightly at first, pattering on the oilskin cape of our trapman. But by the time we trotted into the village of Drenn itself, we were all but drenched. Whilst we didn't catch sight of it, the sea could be heard roaring up the beach and crashing itself to a white fury of foam on the pebbles. The wind lashed the rain into positively lethal darts which all but lacerated Isaac's delicate skin. Sir Maxwell, on the other hand, whilst not accustomed to the cold and the wet at this time of year, was no stranger to tough weather of either extreme. He sat with a face like a dropped bulldog, the rain splashing off his thick hide. At last, we came to the gateway of Embuggerance Hall. As we approached the building, a chill went down my spine, partly through fear, but mainly due to the rainwater that had found an entrance down the back of my collar. There it stood, upon the wind-cracked vista, brooding beneath the iron sky. Glowering and dilapidated, reminiscent of a beaten and scarred wolf, stooped over its fallen prey.
Cheery place, isn't it?
In The Cleric and Coach B, you heard Roger Parkins as George Hotbuns, Lewis Alcock as Isaac Saddlesore, Callum Hale as Maxwell Gropefund. Other parts played by members of the cast. All original music by Dylan Alcock.